Part 10, The Young Marrieds, 1964 to 1965. So we settled into married life. Work for me was going great, but Franny was not thrilled with her job. The owners, the Shiphon family, consisted of the father and 4 brothers. They loved Franny and were at our wedding. But the place was in an old industrial part of Philadelphia, and it took her about an hour to get there and home by public transportation. Also, the accountant who shared an office with Franny, his name was Bill, was a real jerk. It made life miserable for her. And let's face it, her $40 a week take-home really didn't compensate for the misery. So in mid-1954, we decided that she really didn't need to work anymore, and so she quit her job. She was now a lady of leisure. We loved our apartment. Our next-door neighbors were Dave and Norma Bell. It turns out that Norma was a classmate of Fran's at Germantown High School. According to Franny, Norma was in the extreme top-level clique at school, and they never even talked as far as she remembered. Dave was an outgoing guy that worked at a local Philadelphia radio station in sales. Well, despite their different social status in school, we all became good friends. Another neighbor was Mr. and Mrs. Ruben Amaro, he being the shortstop for the Philadelphia Phillies. Mrs. Amaro was a friendly lady, and we'd always stop and talk to her as she walked her son, Ruben Jr., in his baby carriage. Now, Ruben Amaro Jr. would also go on to play shortstop for the Phillies, and he was also their general manager for a while. From what I understand, he is now the radio broadcaster. I mentioned earlier that we lived halfway between our parents. It was a little more than 5-minute drive away. It was very convenient since we had dinner a few nights a week at each of their houses. However, it had its drawbacks. Imagine, if you will, it's about 10 a.m. Sunday morning. We are still in bed, although we've been awake since about 8:30, and then "Hi, it's us, Mommy and Daddy. We brought over bagels and lox. Can you buzz us in?" Yeah, hold on. Give us a few minutes. Fran, okay, we have less than 5 minutes to finish. And that went on. This scenario played on at least 3 or 4 times a month. And although we enjoyed the company, it was, a little, shall we say, disruptive. In the summer of 1964, we took our first vacation. We did a driving tour of New England. We drove to Tanglewood, the summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and New England's premier concert in the park. It was beautiful, magical place. Then we went to Cape Cod and stayed in Woods Hole, visited Provincetown, and of course went to see Hyannisport and the Kennedy compound. The final leg of the trip was in Boston, where we took the Freedom Trail tour and ate the best lobster that we had ever eaten. Back home, things were really getting interesting at work. I dove into the project I was working on and became really an expert in the Titan rocket guidance system. Then, in February 1965, I was officially assigned the responsibility for the so-called answer package for the first manned Gemini mission, Gemini 3, to be held at the end of March. The answer package is what they call the program that is run at launch minus 15 minutes to verify that all the guidance settings are correct and that the Titan rocket will place the Gemini capsule in the proper orbit around the Earth. No pressure. As a side note, after the announcement that I was assigned this job, I was summoned into the office of Dr. Sherwood, the head of HR. At first, I didn't realize it, but when I walked into his office, I recognized that Dr. Sherwood is the guy that interviewed me at Temple and recommended me for the job at Burroughs. When I walked in, he stood up, put his hand out, and said, "I want to shake your hand and thank you." "For what?" I said. "For far exceeding expectations." He then said he fought hard to hire me against everyone's advice because he saw something that led him to believe that I would succeed at Burroughs. He had just heard of my new assignment and wanted to congratulate me. Wow, that felt good. A few days later, I was surprised to learn that I would be going to Cape Canaveral for the launch of the Gemini 3 mission. I asked Franny if she would like to go with me, and, of course, she agreed. So at the end of March in 1965, we went to Florida, and instead of a luxury hotel, we stayed at a small motel in Cocoa Beach, Florida. It was great. The area around the launch complex was packed with people coming to see the Gemini launch. Remember, it was still front page news then. The morning of the launch, I was taken to the blockhouse, which is the building literally less than a quarter mile from the launch pad. The building contained the Burroughs computer that will guide the rocket. I was a nervous wreck. I kept thinking, did I check everything? What if I screwed up? Why didn't I become a pharmacist? Anyway, as the countdown reached T-minus 15 minutes, I heard the mission controller say, "Do we have a go from the answer package?" Somebody said the response was, "I have a go from guidance." When the count reached 0, we heard
0, ignition, and we have a liftoff. We have a liftoff at 24 minutes after the hour.
Clock started. Roger. Lighting on camera.
Rising very nicely. Captain pressure climbing.
Light better. I don't have any.
Yes.
The clock's in sync light. Roger, how you guys? How you guys? We're go flight both systems. Roger. How you, Surgeon? Surgeon, go. GNC. Go flight. Econ, go.
Account 60 seconds. T plus 60 seconds. That booster is flying at a speed of 658 miles an hour. They're coming up on staging or booster engine cutoff. We have a staging report. We can confirm staging.
It seemed forever until SECO, us rocket guys' language for secondary engine cutoff, meaning that the spacecraft was placed in orbit and the engines were now off. Then we heard, "Everything normal. Gemini is in orbit." Everybody in the room cheered. We all shook hands and congratulated each other. How cool was this? When I got back to the hotel after the Gemini launch, Franny was still watching it on TV. We continued watching the rest of the mission until the astronauts were recovered safely. Then we went out to a local bar and celebrated with all the people that participated in the launch. It was wild, and Fran and I really enjoyed every single minute of it, being part of an historical event like that. I found out that the next few days there was another launch. It was the Ranger mission, which was sending a spacecraft that was going to the moon and relay close-up pictures of the surface before it crashed into the moon. I was asked if I wanted to attend the launch, and sure enough, I told him I did. So, after a week in Florida, we headed home. Both our families came over to our place, and they invited all our relatives to celebrate the success of Harvey's space mission. Incredible. That weekend, I went to work in the store to give my folks some time off. So I'm pouring coffee for some workers that had come in, and they were reading the paper. Of course, there's news all over the paper about the successful Gemini mission. So I say to one of the guys, "Hey, isn't that great about the space mission?" And he says, "Sure is. Those guys that did that gotta be geniuses." And I say, "Thank you. I was one of those guys. In fact, I just got back from Cape Canaveral where I worked on the launch." The guy looks at me and says, "Right. Give me another cup of coffee." Oh well, back to reality. In early April, when I left work one evening to go home, I discovered that we were caught in a snow blizzard. I hated driving in snow, but with my VW Bug, I thought it wouldn't be too bad. However, things kept getting worse. Then about halfway home on the freeway, a car in front of me started spinning. Everything seemed in slow motion as it slid and kept spinning towards me. Then, bang! It crashed into the front of my car and pushed in the whole front end. Thankfully, the VW Bug was a rear-engine car, so I was able to continue home, but the damage was pretty bad. Then, about a mile from my house, I drove into a snowbank and got stuck. The car wouldn't budge. I didn't have snow boots on, so I had to stand in knee-deep snow and dig out with my hands. About 20 or 30 minutes later, I got the car loose and was able to get home, totally frozen. My feet had horrible frostbite, and I couldn't even feel them. Franny called around and finally got somebody to tell her how to treat frostbite. And a few hours later, my feet were swollen to about twice the size. It actually took a few days just to be able to walk. "This is it," I said. "We're moving the hell out of here. No more snow." I had no idea when or where, but it was going to happen sooner or later. Back at work, I was told that I would represent Burroughs Corporation at the Gemini Mission Review Panel at the Manned Space Flight Center in Houston, Texas. The meeting was scheduled for April 22nd and 23rd, 1965. Since this was a quick trip and filled with meetings all day, it wasn't necessary to take Franny. Now, Franny always had a dog, but I never had a dog, so we didn't have a dog. But she waited until she had some leverage and then sprung it on me. "Since you're going away without me, I'm getting a dog to keep me company while I'm alone. For 3 days." All right, I agreed. You can get a dog. However, I soon forgot about that and left for Houston. The trip to Houston was really interesting. Visiting the Manned Space Flight Center was exciting enough, but I was on a number of panel discussions, like this one and this one, and was scheduled to be in the debriefing by the astronauts, Gus Grissom and John Young. That was really great. I was 23 years old, less than 2 years out of college, where I graduated with the lowest GPA in the class. And here I was getting a debriefing by 2 astronauts and sitting on panels with the top space scientists and engineers in the world. Life sure takes some strange turns. When I got home, Franny gave me this. And then she introduced me to the newest member of the family. "Harvey, meet Laddie. Laddie, meet Harvey." Laddie would then spend the next 15 years tormenting me. One night, when I got home from work, I parked my car in the normal spot. However, when I went out the next morning to go to work, my car wasn't there. Like an idiot, I walked around the whole neighborhood looking for my car, knowing I always parked in this spot. Finally, I had to admit that my car was stolen. I never saw my beloved Smokey, I actually gave it a name, again. For some very stupid reason, after I settled with the insurance company, I bought a Dodge. It was, in hindsight, a really dumb idea. It was not only ugly, but I hated that car. I really hadn't done anything about my promise to get out of Philadelphia. But in early May, two events occurred that kind of forced my hand. First, a stupid administrator for the HR department made a bunch of copies of an internal memo and left the original in the copy machine. The person that found it quickly circulated it around the company. It had stated that no more space work was expected, so there would be layoffs starting after the summer. So, not being stupid, I would have to start looking for a new job now. By coincidence, on the Sunday paper that weekend, there was this ad. The Space Technology Labs was the company that wrote the guidance program that I've spent the last 2 years validating. And they were looking for people to work on it. This was perfect. I wrote them a letter explaining what I was doing at Burroughs. A few days later, I got this telegram. Remember telegrams? Inviting me to Los Angeles for an interview. After making the necessary arrangements, I got this telegram with the trip information. I left on May 14th, 1965 for my first trip to the West Coast. I actually had to look up Redondo Beach on the map, and my first impression was that it was near Hollywood. I knew nothing about Los Angeles area other than I'd seen it in the movies. Franny and her father drove me to the airport. I remember having to stop twice at gas stations to deal with my upset stomach. This time I wasn't nervous about flying. It was caused by thinking, what the hell am I going to do if they offer me a job? So I took the flight to Los Angeles. When I arrived, I took a cab to the Plush Horse Inn on Pacific Coast Highway in Redondo Beach. Oh my God, there were palm trees and people walking in bathing suits. It was just like I had pictured. I asked the front desk for directions to the beach and walked about 1.5 miles. When I got to the beach, I decided this was the place for me. It was just beautiful. The people, kids surfing, the Pacific Ocean, the large beach. Yeah, I could learn to live in a place like this. Okay, now I had to get the job. The next morning, I took a cab to the Space Technology Laboratory campus at One Space Park. This was an ultra-modern facility. In fact, they were still building there, so that there were trailers where people had to work because of the increase in employees. I had 4 interviews set up. I frankly do not remember them at all, but I think I did good because I was very confident when I got home. When I did get back, I told Franny that if I got the job, I wanted her to agree to move because if she doesn't, I won't take the job. What a surprise when she said to me, "Of course I'll move to California." She was excited as I was. Now the waiting began. Then, on May 25th, 1965, I was listening to the second Cassius Clay versus Sonny Liston fight when the phone rang. I hesitated on whether to answer it, but I decided I better. I'm glad I did. It was the Space Technology Labs telling me that I would be getting a letter in the next few days offering me a job. They were going to pay me $10,000 a year, plus all the expenses to move. Oh boy. The letter indicated that even though I only had 3 interviews, I actually got 5 different job offers, which was pretty incredible. Well, I signed the letter. I picked one of them that I thought was the best one that I remembered. I looked at Franny and I said, okay, how the hell are we going to tell our parents about this? That was the next problem we had to deal with. Needless to say, neither set of parents had any reason to not support our move to Southern California. After all, I was getting a large increase in pay and getting to work at one of the most prestigious companies in the country. So we were scheduled to leave the last week of June, and my first day at work at the new job was going to be July 12th, 1965. We were going to drive across the country in our new ugly car, which, by the way, had no air conditioning. To help us with Laddie and ease the transition, we were taking Fran's 13-year-old sister Merle on our trip. We had a going-away party at Fran's parents' house with many friends, relatives, and co-workers attending. I sent a letter of resignation to Burroughs, which wasn't a big surprise to them since most of my group had already indicated that they were also leaving. In fact, my boss, Gil Friedman, also accepted a job at Space Technology Labs, but fortunately in a different department. So began a new, exciting, adventurous period in our lives. We didn't realize at the time, but as we shall see, our move also led to unimaginable changes in the lives of our parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and their families.